Hey everyone, and welcome back to the channel. Today, we're diving into a topic that might sound a little out of time. We're going to explore why, in the year 2026, some audio purists are ditching their CDs and turning back the clock to the humble 8-track tape. It sounds crazy, right? But stick with me, because the reasons are fascinating, and they all come down to one magical phrase: analog warmth. So, what is this analog warmth people are always talking about? It's not just nostalgia. It's a real, tangible sonic quality that comes from the physical nature of magnetic tape. When an 8-track tape plays, it's not just recreating sound, it's actively shaping it. The mechanical process of the tape passing over a magnetic playback head introduces tiny, almost imperceptible imperfections that our ears find incredibly pleasing. One of the key ingredients is harmonic distortion. Now, distortion sounds like a bad word, but in the analog world, it can be beautiful. As the tape is read, it generates subtle, even order harmonics. Think of these as phantom notes that sit just above the original music. They don't change the song, but they add a sense of richness and body, particularly in the mid-range frequencies where vocals and guitars live. This is what gives 8-track recordings that famous thick or round quality that digital formats just can't replicate. Then there's something called soft clipping. Imagine a sound wave. When a digital recording gets too loud, it hits a hard limit, a brick wall. The top of the wave is just chopped off flat, which results in a harsh, grating distortion that's really tiring to listen to. But tape is different. When the signal on an 8-track gets too loud, it doesn't just cut off. Instead, it gently rounds off the peaks. This natural compression sounds much smoother and more musical to our ears. It tames the loudest parts of a song without making it sound squashed or lifeless. And here is a fun fact that might surprise you. 8-track tapes actually have a technical edge over their more famous cousin, the cassette. An 8-track tape runs at 3.75 inches per second. A standard cassette crawls along at just half that speed, 1.875 inches per second. In the world of analog tape, faster is almost always better. This higher speed gives 8 tracks the potential for a much better high-frequency response and overall greater fidelity. It means more detail, more clarity, and a more robust sound. So, when people dismiss 8 tracks as low quality, they're often overlooking this key technical advantage. But the story isn't just about the tape itself. A huge part of why vintage 8 tracks can sound so good comes down to how the music was prepared in the first place. We need to talk about historical mastering. See, the perceived quality of any format, be it vinyl, tape, or digital, is heavily influenced by the production choices made in the studio. In the 1970s, the golden age of the 8-track, was a very different time for audio engineering. Back then, recordings were mastered with a lot of what's called headroom. This refers to the dynamic range, the difference between the quietest whispers and the loudest crashes in a piece of music. Engineers in the 70s made sure to preserve this space. They weren't trying to make everything as loud as possible. The result was music that could breathe. It had punch, it had subtlety, and it felt alive. When you listen to a well-preserved 8-track from that era, you're hearing the music as it was intended to be heard, with all its natural peaks and valleys intact. Now, let's contrast that with what happened later, particularly starting in the mid-1990s with the rise of CDs. This era saw the beginning of the loudness war. Record labels and engineers got into an arms race to make their tracks sound louder than everyone else. To do this, they used heavy-handed digital compression and limiting, squashing the dynamic range until there was almost no difference between the quiet and loud parts. This is that brick walling we talked about earlier. While it makes a track sound loud on the radio or on small speakers, it also causes significant listener fatigue and strips the music of its emotional impact. Many early CDs actually sound fantastic, but a huge number of remasters from the 90s and 2000s are victims of this loudness war, sounding flat and harsh compared to their analog predecessors. And let's not forget the gear itself. The sound of an 8-track isn't just the tape, it's the entire ecosystem. Vintage 8-track players and receivers from the 1970s were built with a completely different philosophy. They used components like warm-sounding capacitors and transistors that were specifically designed to complement the sonic signature of analog tape. These old systems have a character all their own. When you pair a vintage tape with a vintage player, you get a synergy that's almost impossible to replicate with modern equipment. It's a complete, holistic listening experience where every part of the chain contributes to that warm, inviting sound. Now, let's get a little more technical and talk about the flow of the audio itself. An 8-track tape uses 1/4-inch magnetic tape. Why is that significant? Because it's the exact same width as the tape used in professional studio reel-to-reel machines. This was a serious, high-quality format, not just a cheap consumer gimmick. The magic of the 8-track lies in its unique endless loop design. The tape is a continuous, unbroken ribbon of audio. This is fundamentally different from how digital audio works. A CD, for instance, works by taking thousands of tiny snapshots of the sound every second, 44,100 of them, to be exact. It's an incredibly detailed process, but at its core, it's still a reconstruction of the original sound wave. Some audiophiles argue that this process of sampling, no matter how fast, misses some of the intangible, fluid nature of a sound wave. They claim that the continuous, unbroken signal from a tape is more organic and more natural to the human ear. It's not a series of dots being connected. It's a continuous line. This unbroken flow is a core part of the argument for analog superiority. Finally, there's one more cool trick the 8-track had up its sleeve: quadraphonic sound. Long before home theater surround sound became common, some 8-track tapes in the 1970s were released in a 4-channel format. This was a primitive but effective form of surround sound, with 2 speakers in the front and 2 in the back, creating an immersive listening experience that was way ahead of its time. Standard stereo CDs simply can't replicate this without specialized processing and modern equipment. But with the right vintage quadraphonic 8-track player, you could experience albums like Pink Floyd's The Dark Side of the Moon in a way that was truly mind-blowing for its era. So is the 8-track tape actually better than a CD? Objectively, in terms of pure technical specs like signal-to-noise ratio, a CD is superior. But music isn't just about specs. It's about feeling, emotion, and character. The analog warmth from tape saturation, the musical soft clipping, the superior dynamic range of older masters, and the continuous flow of audio all combine to create an experience that many people find more engaging and enjoyable. In 2026, the turn back to 8-tracks isn't about rejecting technology. It's about embracing a different philosophy of sound. It's a reminder that sometimes the most pleasing imperfections are what make music truly perfect. What do you think? Are you an analog purist or a digital devotee? Let me know down in the comments. Thanks so much for watching. And if you enjoyed this trip back in time, be sure to hit that like button and subscribe for more deep dives into the world of audio. See you in the next one.